Hi, my name is Mike May. I shoot video and have produced a few disaster relief documentaries for Somebody Cares America. After Hurricane Ike, I had the opportunity to ride shotgun with Doug Stringer and observe the relief process firsthand. This is the third hurricane that I've observed Somebody Cares respond to. I was also given the opportunity to edit video highlighting the relief efforts for the Indonesian tsunami in 2004. Somebody Cares may not consider the primary emphasis of their ministry as disaster relief, but their commitment to rebuilding the lives of those impacted by these disasters have left them with considerable experience, a trusted reputation as a ministry committed to the long-term rebuilding process, and a capable network of ministries who also share their commitment to restoring lives. The process of recovery after a hurricane or other natural disaster goes through a few different phases: immediate rapid response, recovery, and then rebuilding. Each phase is critical and presents its own dynamic challenges. FEMA officials have indicated that FEMA can really only be counted upon to offer up to 25% of the assistance needed in the aftermath of these crises. The rest of the aid comes from various other areas, but is largely dependent on faith-based organizations like Somebody Cares and their partners. These ministries and churches truly are committed to the long-haul process of rebuilding, and for many it comes at a significant sacrifice to their own ministry operating budget. These ministries step out in faith, often operating from budgets that are not equipped to handle the massive strain of a natural disaster. Yet ministries like Somebody Cares provide a crucial role and are able to respond and coordinate relief efforts even before and often in the absence of the well-funded organizations. The absence of Somebody Cares in this process would leave a hole that would be felt by many. They deserve more attention and should be the focus of greater fundraising that would allow them to respond in even greater ways. This video will focus on the immediate response after Ike, Phase 1, and highlight how Somebody Cares America was uniquely equipped to coordinate essential relief efforts from Houston, in spite of their own offices receiving significant damage from the storm. This is the story of a net that works. Doug and a handful of his team were, as always, committed to riding out the storm at their offices, manning the phones in case others unable to evacuate required assistance.
The rains haven't hit hard yet, but the winds are blowing hard, and so we're just praying for everybody to be safe and for all the churches and ministries ready to get up and running as soon as the storm passes.
Ike came at a time when Somebody Cares was coordinating relief efforts for Hurricane Gustav. Doug was already in contact with Denny Nestle and the Christ in Action team. Denny and his team are experts in the area of disaster relief. His team was on the ground in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks at the Pentagon.
This is the one that was on the Pentagon parking lot. Double stack convection oven, 3 commercial grills, 60-gallon steam cooker.
His setup is first class, offering a shower truck, hot meals, and computer terminals for registering with FEMA. Having worked with Denny in the past, Doug knew what kind of relief Christ in Action brought with them.
We have 8 laptops. We set up a cyber cafe.
I remember that.
So that people can, now, how many people pay their bills online?
That's true. Check on FEMA things.
FEMA, insurance, Red Cross benefits. Just stay in touch with our loved ones. Say, I'm still alive. I'm doing okay, you know.
Even as Ike was in the Gulf, Doug felt that Christ in Action could serve most strategically from Grace Community Church, pastored by Doug's friend Steve Riegel.
Thanks for all you've done to help coordinate everything, and we just do the best we can to help as many people as we can.
Yes.
Grace just happened to be located on the edge of the mandatory evacuation zone, closest to the Galveston region. At the time of Doug's interview on KSBJ that Sunday night, well over 85% of Houston still remained without power, and officials were predicting it would take up to 4 weeks for power to be restored. I live in Humble, Texas, in the northeast part of Houston. Our power was among the first to go back on, only 19 hours after the storm, but for many it would be weeks of darkness.
A lot of folks without power. Say about 2.2 million people right now don't have power on a grid that includes 2.4 million customers.
With no power, there was no refrigeration. For those requiring refrigerated medicine, this could present itself as life-threatening. Ice was a critical need, and Councilman Adrian Garcia, who was a friend of Doug's, called asking for any assistance he could offer. Doug, aware of a semi-truck that had been mobilized and was en route from First Baptist of Grandview, Texas, was able to direct it to an area of the city where there was no existing pod.
Yes, we need water. We need everything.
Because of you, these people are having a blessing. There are no lights, and obviously they don't have much out here, and this ice is what they needed. So we certainly appreciate you. You've been a blessing to us. First Baptist Church has been a blessing to us, and we really appreciate you.
Watching Doug work during this time, you would not have been aware that his own offices, the base of operations for an international ministry, had taken a direct hit from the storm. Doug and his team seemed to serve with the same strength and dedication as they would have if they were operating without any loss of their own. But there were times you could tell it had taken its toll.
Pastor Charles and Beverly Burchett were on our conference call earlier and saying, Doug, there was lines. People were promised food to come in. It didn't come in. We did get one truckload, but it was not enough to feed the lines of people. She was going through the lines and saying, I'm so sorry we won't have enough right now. And they began to say, it's okay, because there's greater needs in other places, and because somebody cares has been so good to us. We know there's other needs in Houston and other places. We can wait. And that's just the graces of people all over the Gulf.
Relocating to offices provided by Pastor Dusty Kemp at New Life Church, they remained undeterred by the damage to their own property. During these days, I would often hear Doug rallying others by reminding them that God never asks us for what we don't have. But like the young boy who, in faith, gave his loaves and fishes to Jesus, he only asks us to give him what we do have. Then somehow he takes what seems to us like only an insignificant drop of faith in an ocean of endless need and meets every need beyond what we could ever imagine.
I would love to appreciate and say thanks, whatever, for the team that came in. They helped us so much, especially at my mom and dad's house, which it's the only time I've been emotional, and I'm glad some people were with me that cared, because it really made a difference.
Daily conference calls would be an essential time of assessment as the damage reports came in from areas that never ever came under any media spotlight. The total devastation of Ike was considerable due to the massive surface area the storm covered. In areas like Bridge City, the storm had reduced communities of 2,500 homes to just 17 homes. But the focus of the national media had turned back to the elections, and it was evident that the massive funding that came in after Katrina would probably not be available for victims of Ike. Ike hit Galveston the night of Friday, September 12th. Doug was able to get into Galveston Wednesday, September 17th. While the area remained closed to many of the residents. A few of the Galveston business owners in the community were aware of Somebody Cares relief work after Hurricane Ike and requested that Doug come in to assess the damage and begin to establish a presence for the faith-based teams. After observing their own loss and aware of the uncertain emotional journey they had experienced over those initial days, these caring Galveston residents feared the worst as they anticipated the return of those who had evacuated.
David Lawther, front of Juju's Hangout, 2408 Strand. Just now opened up the place. About 7 feet of water inside. Pretty bleak looking. Mud everywhere.
Rusty Carnes, funeral director of Carnes Brothers Funeral Home, probably said it best.
The needs haven't showed up yet. The needs will be here Wednesday.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. It'll be major needs. You're gonna have. Well, you know what I've thought about it, and it's not been provided. What needs to be, you need to have pastors going door to door to those houses on the west end, west of 53rd Street. Pastors need to go to door and ask people what can they do for them, and really they're going to just want you to pray for them.
Right.
Because, we were here when the storm. The whole time we didn't leave. We rode it out right here in Galveston, and after the storm, you walk around. Everybody you see, they look like zombies, literally like zombies. I am about 150,000 times better than I was for the first 3 days.
Yeah.
You know, I finally, went through all the process of grieving, and it's just like somebody died, honestly. And I know a little bit about that. You have to go through that entire process, and when these people come back Wednesday, you're gonna have some desperate people.
And like he said, he understands grief. Carnes Funeral Home would become the site of the Good News Galveston camp. On those first trips, we met Joe Flores, Becky Little, and Teresa Kershaw. Teresa's house somehow had remained upright even though it was on the west side of the island, unprotected by any seawall. Her home had filled with water and sea mud, and the floor was buckled, but she was grateful that her pictures and items belonging to her recently deceased husband still remained intact. Many others had lost everything. Galveston was in rough shape and would feel the impact of Ike for months, but more likely, years. Doug was coordinating a few important dynamics during this time, getting assistance to those ministries responding to the massive immediate needs in their communities like food, water, and ice, but also looking to establish bases of operation from which the relief teams that would soon arrive to help rebuild these areas could operate. One of the potential sites of teams to be housed was in Hitchcock, Texas, just outside Galveston. Pastor John and Patty Elliott at the Gulf Coast Foursquare Church are longtime friends of Doug. I found John's story to be among the compelling stories I heard.
All the people that we went to help in Mississippi, New Orleans, and those places are the ones calling us now how they can help us. But his crew was out there 2 years and helping to rebuild churches, helping gut.
Do you know that our last team is on the ground right now from Ohio, finishing up the Brother Rawls Church?
Yeah.
They called me and they said, we got 2 weeks here and we're pretty much wrapping this up.
But that's why we need to come back together and get the body of Christ to come help people like John.
For the past few years, he had been coordinating relief teams going into the Louisiana Gulf Coast region to rebuild those areas. Now his own facility had taken a direct hit, and only months after the tragic loss of his own son. These are the remarkable people who have laid their lives down for a cause much bigger than their own. In Texas City, Mark Roy, director of Blood and Fire San Antonio, and a field director for Somebody Cares, had made contact with Pastor Kevin Heron and the Fellowship of Texas City.
Well, first of all, one of the most incredible stories, this whole area, they fared pretty well because they have a good seawall. 1 foot, it would have been disaster. All the power around this entire church was out. When they got here, the power never went out of the church here, and they really feel like that was a sign that they were to be a lighthouse to this community.
That's providential.
Totally.
The amazing story of how this church was spared through the storm and now positioned to bring relief to their community is another example of how the faith-based relief teams can assess and mobilize into areas that are often sadly overlooked. Anyone who underestimates the value of the local church during these times does the community a major disservice. Daily, the fellowship team were cooking, distributing, and delivering hot meals and coolers of ice and vitamin water to San Leon and also into Galveston.
You know, the community we've been feeding mostly is our neighboring town. It's called San Leon, and they took on 8 feet of salt water.
Wow.
8 feet high was how high the surge was that came in there. And now the salt water's gone and the vitamin water's coming in.
It might have been more convenient for this church to be thankful that their facilities had been spared and leave it at that. But for Pastor Kevin, this was really not an option. And he saw the devastation as an opportunity to truly represent the kingdom of heaven to those in his community who were in great need, giving all they could.
We sat for about 5 or 6 days with very little supplies to give people coming by in need. And I just kind of said, Lord, you know, you want me to do this or go home and trim my trees? I went home and trimmed my trees, and the next morning I got to the church and Doug Stringer and all the guys, Blood and Fire, showed up in my office. I had no idea they were coming, and man, things are just exploding. We're able to take food out into all the communities around us that are just devastated, and all I can do is say thank you, Lord, for using us as a provision.
3 weeks after the storm, Doug pulled together all of the ministries that had been on the ground serving. The assessment at this time confirmed that although the media attention had long shifted, the need remained considerable.
87% of the meals that were served during Katrina were served by faith-based organizations. 57% of the homes rebuilt in Mississippi and Louisiana were done by faith-based organizations. The government gave me those stats. It's not that some Christian group came up. This is what the government came up with.
Right now, the biggest thing we see, the push, the media is not giving you guys any credits, any coverage. The election and the economy are overshadowing this whole thing.
Oak Island is a community of 500 south of Anahuac on Galveston Bay. 3 intercessors were there just now. And they said that, and they have been in Bridge City, and they said it's worse than Bridge City.
It was at this meeting that we first heard of Oak Island. Pastor Charles Burchett and the Somebody Cares Southeast Texas team had received a call from the pastor of Oak Island Baptist Church. They had lost everything, but were undeterred and using the little that remained to try to meet the needs of their community. That weekend, Doug was recognized for the work Somebody Cares had done in response to Ike. First, it was the Houston Symphony at Grace Church. All the relief workers were invited to attend a special concert with proceeds benefiting the Somebody Cares Ike Relief Fund. Then Sunday morning, Doug was the guest of the Houston Texans as they took on the Indianapolis Colts. At halftime, Doug was escorted out onto the field to be recognized by Mayor Bill White, Judge Ed Emmett, and Governor Rick Perry.
It is our pleasure to introduce to you some amazing individuals in our community. In the days following Hurricane Ike, these individuals put their normal lives on hold in order to help their neighbors during a difficult time. Our first honoree is Doug Stringer, whose organization, Somebody Cares America, started 27 years ago in the Houston area. After Hurricane Ike, Somebody Cares America served over 4,000 hot meals and distributed ice, water, and generators. In addition, Mr. Stringer returned volunteers from across the nation to help with mold inspections, and he coordinated the donation of 8 semi-trucks filled with office supplies from area businesses. Mr. Stringer and his staff stayed in our offices and handing homes during the hurricane to start opening, even though the offices were receiving excessive damage. Please, everyone, let's welcome Doug Stringer.
You know, that was pretty cool to see Doug recognized for what he had been doing. I just wish they had also given him a big check to help him with the many ongoing needs that he was still aware of, that others were no longer talking about. Seeing Doug honored in a stadium filled with cheering fans might be a good place to end the story of Ike. But sadly for many in the Texas Gulf Coast region, their Ike story will not be over for a long time. For many in Houston, when their power came on, the hurricane was over. But for many in the Galveston region, the power will not come back on for a long time. In fact, for many, their homes will have to be completely rebuilt before power is even an option. Somebody Cares and their partners remain committed to helping these people put their lives back together.
I'm Jerry Charping, I live at 637 Troy Street. We're up here at the church getting some food, and they're feeding barbecue to everybody, and everything's been going along fairly good. FEMA hadn't got a hold of us yet, but they're gonna. They said they would be getting around to us. It's been tough, lots of mosquitoes. We need mosquito spray, but we haven't got a whole lot of it. We need tents, but we haven't got a tent yet. We're living on the back of a 16-foot trailer, but it's gonna get better, sure is.
On Saturday, October 18th on Oak Island, Somebody Cares hosted an outreach and crockpot giveaway for the people in that community. It was a day of fun and food, a day where people still hurting from Ike could get their minds off of things for a while before they would have to go back to gutting out their homes and doing life after a hurricane. There is one other heroic story in the midst of all the relief efforts that really must be shared. On our initial trips into Galveston, Pastor Jerry Davis was in the midst of the coordinating efforts, doing all he could to prepare to serve the Galveston community. He is known as the disaster pastor for his efforts in New Orleans after Katrina. He and his wife Melinda had gone to New Orleans and taken over operations of the Good News Camp for Don Tipton and the Friendships. During this time, Melinda was battling cancer.
When she's not in the hospital or short visits with the family, she's here in Galveston, and she's made up her mind, and she's determined, and she wants to make sure that we're here doing everything we can to win souls, to rescue lives, and to exalt Christ in this situation. And so my fight is for the Lord, and also on behalf of my wife, and honoring her and her request in this time. And so I'll be with her. I'll be with her very, very shortly. Yeah. But she is setting a stand. I can't tell you, Doug, how many people tell me, and they come to the camp, people that don't even know us come and say, you know what, I'm here because I heard that if Melinda, being attacked on the battlefield, nigh unto death, would go to the battlefield and fight, I cannot do any less than to come. And so if that's a challenge.
It reminds me, Jerry, of what Jesus spoke about in Luke chapter 9. And, you know, here it is, Luke, the great physician, Jesus, the great physician. Luke was a physician.
Yes.
But he speaks of all these things. And in Luke chapter 9, starting in verse 51, but it says, when Jesus was ready to be taken up or be crucified, go into his own sufferings, that he set his face to go to Jerusalem. Why? Because he wanted to go there on behalf of the people. He had to go there and do it for them, even though they were offended. And along the way, he kept asking people to follow, and they all had excuses. Well, I have to do this, I have to do that. They all had an excuse to go back to business as usual. When we're done with our business, then we'll follow you. And the last verse of that chapter, he says, if any man puts his hand to the plow and looks back, he's not fit for the kingdom. Now, that's a pretty tough statement. What we're saying is, there's all kinds of excuses of not to pray, not to get involved, not to sow resources into these great ministries that are partnering together that need the finances and human resource and procurement of resources to help bring hope and good news through the gospel to people. And yet we don't have time for excuses. We can't put our hand to the plow and look back. We got to put our hand to the plow and take this as that window of opportunity to bring glory to our Lord and to see lives transformed.
Absolutely. All right.
On Saturday, October 25th, Melinda's battle with cancer ended, and she went to be with the Lord. In her final days, she had been with Jerry in Galveston, even in great pain, giving all she could to make a difference in the aftermath of Ike. And although we know Melinda is in a much better place, our prayers are with Jerry. Somebody Cares America and their partners are still greatly in need of your assistance to serve the Texas Gulf Coast region. The eyes of the media have long since moved from this region, but the Lord still sees, and He is looking for those who will continue to be faithful for the long haul, giving what little they may think they can give in faith, knowing that He can multiply it supernaturally. Please pray for our needs and help us spread the word. Volunteers are needed, construction teams to help with the rebuilding efforts, along with financial gifts. Somebody Cares America is good soil and will ensure that your support gets to those still in the greatest need. Your gift really does make a difference. Thank you for caring.